This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
Preeminent facial plastic surgeon and gifted author, Dr. Gailen Mccullough, on this edition of Conversations. Dr. Gailen Mccullough is a leading facial plastic surgeon, an accomplished author, and former Alabama Crimson Tide football player with a national championship ring. He first appeared on this program back in 2009 to talk about his book, The Long Shadow of Coach Paul Bear Bryant. His latest book, Victory in the Game of Life, has some lessons from the famous coach, but it also serves as a game plan for those looking to get the most out of life. We welcome back to Conversations Dr. Gailen Mccullough. Thank you for coming back and joining us.
Thank you, Jeff. It's good to be back. It's been 9 years since we were here.
It has been. Well, in a brand new book out, I'm excited to hear about this, Victory in the Game of Life. How did this one come about?
Well, that's number 18. I've written 18 books now, a book a year for the last 18 years, and I've always got one going. But actually, this book came about a year ago. I was standing at midfield at Bryant Stadium in Tuscaloosa, and I was there to receive an award named after my coach, Coach Paul Bear Bryant. And as I was standing there, I looked up at the stands, and there were 100,000 people in those stands, and there was about 30,000 when I played there. Right. And I thought about that little tract of land that I was standing on the 50-yard line, and all the times that I had stood on that land before, including when I was a high school senior, and then all the times I went back there during the time I played at Alabama. But that day was a very special day, and it all just sort of came down, and I decided on the way home that I would write a book about my feelings and what that award meant to me that day.
Tell me a little bit about that award so people kind of have an understanding of what
it's the Paul W. Bryant Alumni Athlete Award. The award, first recipient was John Crowell from Alabama, and John started a ranch for boys and girls that were abandoned. Many of them didn't have parents. But it has 4 criteria that it considers. One is contribution to society, character, professional achievement, and service to fellow man. And a person has to, of course, be an alumnus of the University of Alabama and have participated in sports there. And I just can't tell you what it meant to me to receive that award named after Coach Bryant.
Yeah, wow, neat. What kind of influence did Paul Bear Bryant have on you?
Well, not a day goes by that I don't think about something that I learned from him, something he said or something that happened during the time that I played for him. And he was more than a football coach. He was a mentor. And then I got to know him from a totally different perspective later in life. I became one of his doctors. And during that period of time, he shared a lot of his personal thoughts and some of his concerns and fears with me about his health and about the state of the University of Alabama itself after he retired. So I learned a lot from the man, and I utilized those lessons that I learned about, well, hiring people and terminating people and managing a business and how to deal with the hard times as well as the good times. So he had a tremendous influence on my life.
What is, if there was one nugget, so to speak, that you took away from him that maybe you keep with you on a regular basis as you go through your business practices or your medical, or doing medical procedures, et cetera? What do you keep in mind? What's that one nugget?
Well, it may be the quote that is most commonly identified with him. He said, "If you believe in yourself and you have dedication and pride and never quit, you'll be a winner. The price of victory is high, but so are the rewards." So that really summarizes the lessons that he taught. And as I said, none of us have a rosy days every day.
Sure.
Yeah, there's a song that says some days are diamonds and some days are stones.
That's right. Yeah.
And there's many diamonds as stones out there. Right. So it's just about how you deal with adversity and how you're persistent and how you surround yourself with good people. Right. And then you delegate when it's appropriate to delegate, but you do yourself when it's time to do.
As I was kind of researching to revisit our conversation here, I stumbled across something you said which I think is really valuable, and I believe you credited your father with this, but it was talking about as we go through life and learning things that we learn. You can either learn from other people by listening to them, or you learn the hard way through the ups and downs. And
from the school of hard knocks, or the trial and error method.
Yeah.
And my dad said it's a whole lot easier if you just pay attention to the people who have already been there, and they've worked out the problems. And you know, It's an old saying, but there's really nothing new in life. I heard one time that if you want a new idea, read an old book.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, as I'm researching the next book that you and I were talking about, The Gift You Give Yourself, I've come across some old books written in the early 1800s, and it's amazing how the same advice that applied in the 1800s apply today in the early 21st century.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit of the meat in this particular book. What's somebody going to learn when they pick up The Victory in the Game of Life?
Well, it's really my memoir. I start back from my parents, the hometown. I grew up in a town called Enterprise, Alabama, a small town of about 9,000 people at that time. The town itself suffered with a lot of adversity. The boll weevil came across and wiped out the cotton crop, and then they reached out to Tuskegee Institute and had George Washington Carver come down and test the soil, and lo and behold, the soil was more acclimated to growing peanuts than it was cotton. So they adapted, they changed, they overcame adversity, and they built a monument to the boll weevil right in the middle of town. And then I go from there through my teachers, my mentors, my coaches, the lessons that I learned in football and athletics. And actually, I never thought I was going to be an athlete. I was a little short, fat kid in junior high school, and I played in the high school band, played a trumpet in the band, and thought that was going to be my destiny. And then all of a sudden, I lost weight, and I grew taller and became an athlete, and I talk about that. I'd won the starting job as quarterback, and then lo and behold, we changed coaches, the town does, and the coach that comes there doesn't have a quarterback in his system. So that quickly I went from being a starting quarterback to a second string offensive center and linebacker.
Okay.
And so the book talks a lot about those things. When you think you got things going along pretty well, all of a sudden life just steps up and slaps you, and sometimes you have to start over again or you quit.
Right.
And there's nothing about quitting in the book. Then I go from there through college and the lessons that I learned from Coach Bryant in college, and then go on through medical school. I talk about the hard times in medical school and some of the things that I learned, my mentors there, and through my facial plastic surgery training, starting in practice. And it's about dealing with adversity. That's what the book is all about, and it's about how to overcome adversity and how to become a winner regardless of whatever one's endeavor might be.
What's been your biggest challenge in life?
Living up to my own expectations, I would say. I learned very early from my father and my mother to set your goals high, to set your expectations high, and never become totally satisfied, because when you become satisfied and you think that you've done it all, you're starting to lose at that point. So that I'm probably harder on myself than I would expect anyone else to be on me.
You say you've written 18 books. I mean, if you think about it, that's pretty amazing, along with running a pretty major, well-respected medical practice of what you do. How do you find time to do
Well, everybody
that?
asks me that. How do you find? You don't find time, you make time.
That's a good
You know, I say now that facial plastic surgery is my vocation, but writing has become my avocation. And I write. When I'm not practicing, and Susan and I watch a little bit of television, but then when I'm not working, I'm writing, and I've got one or two books going at all the time. I've got two right now on the burner, just as soon as this one came out. But you can find time, and I write a little bit every day. I get up a little early and I write an hour or so before I go to work, and then when I come home while Susan's fixing dinner, I write for a little while, and then I'll write a little bit late at night, and then weekends. A lot of people are hunting and fishing and doing other things. I'm sitting at the computer writing. I love it. I get a big kick out of it.
That's great. If you wouldn't have gone into the medical field, do you think you would have been a writer full time?
No, I'd have been an architect.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually had committed to go to Georgia Tech to become an architect, and then Coach Bryant came along and promised me a national championship ring, and I had played on a high school championship team. So all of a sudden, architecture took a second seat, and I went to Alabama, and they didn't have an architectural school. And so I actually went into medicine as a second choice. And I really didn't know that I wanted to be a doctor. I didn't know anything about it. The only thing I knew is when I went to the doctor in Enterprise, I got a shot. You know, I left there crying and screaming. But I thought doctors worked from 10 to 12 and 2 to 4 because that was their clinic hours.
Right.
And I didn't realize they did a lot of things on the other end of that. But then when I did not really realize that I wanted to be a doctor until my second year in med school. I got on the track, the pre-med track, and made the grades, and we had a plastic surgeon come to our class and lecture, and he started showing before and after photographs of people that had had reconstructive and plastic surgery, and it was like a light goes on in a dark room. I said, that's architectural medicine.
Yeah.
And so I immediately knew right then that I had found what my passion was going to be. I never veered from it. I stayed focused on that right to the very end, and still am.
Yeah, because when you think about that, I mean, it's not, I mean, your job, you are to a large degree an artist, because if someone, you know, heaven forbid, gets in an accident and has to have reconstructive, or even if it's just someone trying to make themselves look better. Yeah.
Well, the true artist in my family is my wife, Susan. She's internationally known for her art and getting more so every year. But I do sculpting. I guess you got to be a sculptor of sorts in order to do plastic surgery, because that's the one thing that led me toward architecture, is because it's both a blessing and a curse. I can look at a blank piece of ground and I can see several buildings on that in my mind long before whether they're ever drawn. And that gives me, I think, an advantage when I look at a face. I can generally look at a face and see what needs to be done. And you know, there's certain criteria that we use. The foundation was established by Leonardo da Vinci, who showed us what the facial proportions should be. So you look at a face and you see what's a little bit out of proportion, and you figure out how to bring everything in proportion.
Amazing. We were talking in the green room before we went on the air, and you said you actually had an opportunity to go play professional football for the Dallas Cowboys, but decided to pursue medicine. And I guess you're pretty glad you did that now, huh?
Well, I am now, looking back on it. A lot of my teammates that I played with at Alabama and played against in other places are suffering from not only some of the head trauma issues, but a lot of my friends have had both knees replaced and both shoulders replaced, and so they've had a lot of difficulty. And so I guess I'm blessed in that respect that I didn't, but it was a very difficult decision, because, you know, I had the chance to play with the Dallas Cowboys, who at that time was America's team, if you remember.
Yep, absolutely.
And they told me I'd report as a starting offensive center, and it was very tempting, and the bonus money that they offered me alone would have financed my entire medical school education, and I needed the money.
Yeah.
I really did, because my parents really weren't in a position to finance all of that. And so Susan and I worked my way through medical school. We both had jobs and we worked, and I at one time had 4 or 5 jobs on the side while I was in med school in my training. And it was difficult, because we would sit there on Sunday afternoons, and I had my anatomy book in my lap studying in between plays and during timeouts and halftime, and all of my buddies were out there playing, living in fancy apartments, and Joe Namath had a llama skin rug, driving a new Lincoln Continental, and you know, the fur coats and all that. And I looked around our little apartment that wasn't much larger than this stage, and it was furnished with secondhand furniture that we'd gotten from our parents. And so I really wondered if I'd made the right decision for a long time. But later in life, whenever a lot of my friends that played, their careers were beginning to wind down, my medical practice was going in the opposite direction. Right. So retrospectively, I think I made the right decision. Yeah. But I always wondered, boy, what would it have liked to have been a cowboy for just a little while?
That's right. That's right. Well, you know, you talk about success in life, and so much of, you know, what you ultimately become is about the decisions you make, you know, and you talk about those and those choices. If you were giving advice to a young person who was sitting down and trying to weigh out what they wanted to do and accomplish in life, what would be some of the things that you would recommend they consider?
Well, it's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, and I've talked about this to a lot of young people. As a matter of fact, I'm leaving here this afternoon. I'm going over to speak to the basketball team at West Florida University. I'm going to share some of these things with them. But one of the things that I tell the young people today is that you need some quiet time. You need time alone. You need time when there's not a phone device in your hand or earplugs in your ear, where something's constantly being fed into that. And I look back on my life, and I think I learned who I was inside and who I wanted to be and what I wanted to be by spending time in nature. You know, at those days I did some hunting, still hunting. I'd go into the woods and scratch out a place where there were no leaves and sit there for 2 hours or so and, you know, wait for the squirrels to come in. And I would fish. I loved to fish alone, and I'd sit on the banks and in a boat and just hear the sounds of nature and look up at the sky and just the wonderment of nature, the world that God created. Yeah. And I think young people miss out on a lot. I don't think they know who they are.
Right.
Because they really never spend a lot of time alone. They're constantly being fed information by people that are trying to influence them.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest piece of advice that I would have, and that's spend some time alone and start trying to figure out who you are. And then the second thing that I would advise is pick good mentors. Pick people you admire, whether you're able to meet them personally or go back into the great books and read about people that have been successful, because human nature is repetitive. Yeah. And if we can learn a lot, as we said earlier, by paying attention to the life lessons of folks that have been there before. Yeah. And then pick your passion. Find out what you're good at. You see, in the book of Luke, we learn that a servant was given talents. The 3 servants were given talents by their masters, and they weren't all equal. So we're not all given equal talents, but we're expected to develop the talents that we have. Mm-hmm. And you have to come to grips. You know, I wanted to be a quarterback, but life threw me a curve, and I wasn't going to be a quarterback anymore. Right. So I decided I'd become the best center I could be, or the best linebacker I could be. And then at Alabama, lo and behold, I won the starting job there. And on a practice drill one day, I tackled a running back, and all of a sudden my arms went numb. And I'll go make it into a short story. I broke my neck, and I was done playing linebacker. Mm-hmm. So I had to start all over again. Right. And so just don't give up. Just find a way to overcome whatever curves that life throws you, and stay focused and set your goals high, and don't be satisfied with mediocrity. Set excellence as your example, and just don't ever be satisfied with anything less than that.
Yeah. You know, we were talking a little bit about the green room, and to a large degree, a lot of your business is about people and their appearance. And I know you've actually written a book about, I think it's called The Appearance Factor, and yes. You said your next book kind of working in that direction. And it seems to me, and I'd like for you to elaborate on this, but it seems to me oftentimes people in today's world just do not seem to be taking pride in themselves. And I guess you really have to walk a fine line between being some sort of arrogant jerk, so to speak, and at the same time taking pride in yourself. Would you agree with that?
I do. It's personal pride. And appearance does matter. We were talking earlier about a lot of the research has been done along these lines. And it's been shown that better-looking students get better grades in school. It's been shown that better-looking applicants are more apt to be hired and more apt to be promoted. Now, I realize that may not be politically correct, but it's been that way. Aristotle was the first to write, a pleasing appearance is more important than any letter of introduction. Mm-hmm. And so it's been around a long time, and I just don't know that all of the political correctness things that we're going to do and laws that we're going to try to pass can overcome that. Mm-hmm. Appearance does matter. And, you know, I'm not talking about being Madison Avenue beautiful, but we talked about it. It's how you stand, how you sit, the clothes you wear, whether they're coordinated, whether they fit, whether you look groomed, whether you smile, whether you look pleasant. Character is one of those things. And then all the way down at the bottom is the Madison Avenue appearance of ideal proportions by Da Vinci. And all of those other things a person can do that quickly. You can decide instantly, I'm going to sit up straight, I'm going to smile more, I'm going to coordinate my clothes. And even if you can't afford to have surgical correction on some of the deformities that you might like, you can do a lot of things to improve your appearance. And it pays huge dividends. Yeah. I could tell you story after story after story where somebody came in and they feel better about themselves, so they're more productive, and they're more likable to other people, and it vaults their career.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I think just like you say, little things you can do, like dress well, or smile, or be upbeat about life.
Yeah, be approachable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's
absolutely.
not about arrogance; it's about self-pride.
Absolutely, I agree. I totally agree with you. You mentioned your wife a few moments ago, and she is making a very nice name for herself in the art world. Tell us a little bit about her.
Well, Susan studied art and speech in college, and I took her away from a lot of that. She was raising our kids, and in recent years she started back painting on a full-time basis and opened up a gallery that's there at the Institute, the McCollough Institute, and she paints every day, and she's received numerous awards throughout the world. And one of the things that I'm really most proud about is that she, 2 years ago, was awarded the award of Artist of the Year by Art Tour International, which is the largest art magazine in the world. And it's quite an accomplishment. It was the first time they had ever chosen an Artist of the Year. So she does abstract and impressionistic, and she's getting ready to do her book too.
Awesome.
So I'm really, really proud of her accomplishment.
I also want to mention the fact too that the two of you gave a rather nice donation to the University of Alabama, and I believe established a couple of scholarships or endowments. Tell me a little bit about those.
Well, we both believe that the University of Alabama opened a lot of doors for us. We met there. We met at the University of Alabama, and I know that I could never have achieved a lot of the things that I have, and I think Susan feels that same way. And so we feel that we wanted to give back, and I think in success in life, we're obligated to pay it forward. Once again, I mentioned a biblical verse, and to whom much is given, much is required. And a lot's been given. We've worked hard for it, but a lot's been given to us, and we wanted to give back. And one of the things that we established is it's an institute. It's like a small college within the University of Alabama for pre-med students, for the premier pre-med students, to develop a curriculum that's going to not only allow them to get in med school, but to excel in med school and life thereafter. And then we've established the Susan and McCollough Art Biennale, which will be held every other year, and it will be a place where graduates from the University of Alabama can find a place to display their art. Because if you think it's hard to get somebody to publish a book, it's equally hard to get someone to hang a piece of work, an artwork, in a gallery, or to get your work out there. So this will be a way that the University of Alabama art students will be able to have their art displayed on the campus. And so it's very exciting times for us, and we're real happy that the university wanted to do it in the first place. And Dr. Stuart Bell and his staff up there have done a fabulous job helping get these projects going.
That's really neat. Talk a little bit about, there's so much talk today about kids or young people that they should focus on, what they refer to as STEM, science and technology and engineering and math or medicine or something. But obviously, you're an artist in a way in what you do with your medical practice. Your wife is. How important is it for us as a society to foster arts and creativity?
Well, I think that most of our degrees are simply tickets to allow us to continue learning. Yeah. And if you think that the moment you walk across the stage and you get your diploma that you're through learning, you got a big surprise coming. Yeah. Because in my field, things change. New things come along all the time, and so you have to constantly be studying and learning. And I find out the older I get, the more interested I am in history. And so I think that if there's one thing that we need to try to teach our children is how to think. And we talked earlier about the power of thought. And the power of thought, because James Allen said it very well in his little book, As a Man Thinketh, and is the body is the servant of the mind. And so if we train our minds to be open, and that's the thing that I'm a little concerned about where we are in our society today. We're cubby-holing people, and we're giving them, we're feeding them these thought processes. We're telling them what they can say and what they can't say. We're telling them what they ought to think and what they ought not to think. And I think that's going to be detrimental to society as years go by. We need to teach these young people to be open-minded and to take facts and not accept everything that they're told, but to think about them and then consider them and see if they make sense. Because I've always said something to the doctors that I train: if I can't make it make sense in my head, I don't think I can make it make sense in the operating room. So I would like to see us spend a little bit more time teaching children how to think. Well, you know, mathematics does that. Problem solving does that.
Right.
And so whether we use it through math or other types of things, seminars, I would like to see us give a little bit more thought to something other than this, quote, Common Core. I'm a little concerned about Common Core because the word common means that it's dumbed down to a certain extent.
Right.
I'd like to see us develop an exceptional core.
Yeah.
Something that would inspire all young people to rise to a level, to develop their talents to the maximum available.
Yeah. You mentioned something earlier about mentors. What would your recommendation be for someone if they want? How should you go about seeking out a good mentor? And I've got about 2 minutes here.
Well, the main thing you want to do is look around for successful people in the field of endeavor that you think you might want to pursue, and read about them, and then learn as much as you possibly can about them. People are a little reluctant sometimes to reach out to an individual, but you'll find that most very, very successful people will be very open for a student to come and say, I'd like to come talk to you a little bit about, tell me, share your success with me. And frankly, Jeff, that's what I've tried to do in this book. I've tried to talk about all the people, my mentors, people that I've read about, and I've tried to take the things that made them successful and put them in this book so that I can share that with other people, not only of this generation, but hopefully for generations to come.
Yeah, I think you're so right about what you just said about successful people, because you know, all the super successful people I know are very open to trying to help other people.
There's some jerks out there. There are some jerks, but the majority of successful people are very good folks.
Yeah, and I would totally agree with you. Young people, to feel free to don't think you're going to get rejected. You know, in other words, feel free
be surprised
to reach out. The name of the book is Victory in the Game of Life: A Paul W. Bryant Alumni Athlete's Journey. It's Dr. Gailen Mccullough, and a book about finding mentors and keeping your life motivated and pursuing your achievements. I also want to mention the fact that Dr. Mccullough was on several years ago when we first met, and he had just at that time, you had just published The Long Shadow of Coach Paul Bear Bryant.
Yeah.
And so I know that in our viewing family out there that we have an awful lot of Alabama fans, so they may want to pick up a copy of that as well. The Long Shadow of Coach Paul Bear Bryant. Dr. McCollough, thanks a lot.
Jeff, thanks for having me on again.
My pleasure.
Enjoyed it. I always do.
Thank you so very much. We appreciate it. By the way, you can see many more of our conversations, including our original interview with Dr. McCullough, online at wsre.org/conversations. We're also flying around Facebook and YouTube. I'm Jeff Weeks. Thank you so very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the broadcast. Take wonderful care of yourself, and we'll see you soon.
Support for this program is provided in part by Gulf Power, a Southern company, and by viewers like you. Thank you.